In the last movie, we saw how we could make the create, update, and delete methods abstract, the same way we'd done with our find methods earlier, so that they could be used by any class. Now that's going to be enough to make the delete method abstract so that we can reuse it, but the create and update methods are going to use attributes that they submit to SQL, so we'll need to find a way to also make those attributes abstract. And that's a little trickier than what we did with the table name. So here I am inside user.php, and inside the create method, you'll see that we have a list of the attribute keys, and then down here a list of the attribute values. Now we'd be able to write SQL for both of these if we could simply come up with an array that had both the attribute keys and values in it. And there's several ways that we could accomplish this. I'm going to show you one. I'm going to come up here above the save method, and I'm going to put in a new method, which is going to be called attributes, and it's going to be a protected method. And it's simply going to return an associative array of the attribute keys and their values. Instead of names, I'll say keys. So if we can return that array, then we'll be able to parse through that array to come up with these items down here. Now let's take a look at has attribute that's right above it. Now in has attribute, we were getting a list of the attributes to see whether an array key existed or not, to see if something had the attribute. And we were doing that using get object vars. So for now, let's just use that. I'm going to copy it. We'll just come down here, return get object vars this. So that will now return get object vars as attributes. And so we can actually call that here instead. This is instead going to be attributes. Now that's essentially the same thing as far as has attribute is concerned, but what it gives us is now a method that we can call from other places in our code to get those same attributes. And if we ever make improvements to the way we find our attributes, which we'll do a little later, then we'll have those available to us also. So now that we have our new attributes method, let's go ahead and come down back into create. Let's start by using that. So we have just attributes equal to this attributes. That'll get all our attributes for us. And then all we have to do in order to use those attributes is join together the array keys. So we can use array keys to pull back all the keys of those attributes and join them together with a comma. And that'll give us the SQL that we need there. For the array values down here, we can do something very similar. I'll paste in join together, and we'll include the single quote. Notice I'm starting with a single quote here, single quote, comma, single quote, joining them together. The only difference is that at the very end, I'll need to make sure that I also close everything up with another single quote parentheses. So that'll make sure that the last one has its single quote after it and parentheses as well. So that will now join all the values together, and we'll have a valid SQL statement. Now in the process, I know we lost the code where we were escaping the values for SQL. We'll want to keep that, but we'll come back to that in just a second. For now, let's go on down to the update method and do the same kind of thing. So we'll come down here, and I'll do the same sort of attribute assignment that I was doing before. But notice that the key value pairs that we're going to need here are going to be a little more complicated because we can't simply join the keys together and then join the values together. Instead, they'll be interspersed with equal signs between them. And we can handle that by iterating through the attributes and creating a new array. So we'll do that first. Before we start, we'll make a new array called attribute pairs. We'll go through each of the attributes, and each one as a key and value will assign the new attribute pairs equal to key equals, and then the single quote and the value. Again, I know it's not escaped. We'll work on that in a second. Now we can come down into our SQL statement though, and we can do a replacement for all of these here, and we'll join them together with a single comma. Our single quotes have been taken care of up here. We don't need to worry about those. We're going to join attribute pairs now, not attributes. And that will give us the list that we're looking for. Now there's one more thing we need to be careful about, which is that when we join these together, we'll get a comma space between them. But whatever that last value is, we'll have a single quote, and then it'll start the word where. And we need to make sure that our SQL is valid, so we'll put a space in front of where. So it'll be single quote as the last item, and then where. That's something that frequently trips people up when we're using this sort of multi-line, building up SQL. So you want to be careful about that. So now we've abstracted out those attributes, but in the process we lost the escape value we did. So let's revisit how we can sanitize those SQL values again. Let's go back up to attributes here. Now in addition to having an array of the raw attributes, let's add another version of this that's going to be a method that will loop through those attributes and escape their values and return a new array that's actually been sanitized. And we'll call it sanitized attributes. So it will simply take the database, go through and make a new array called clean attributes by going through each one of the attributes from this method, the getObjectVars version, and go through each one of them. And as it's doing it, it will escape the value. So now we'll have a set of clean attributes. And now we have a choice. We can get either the raw ones or we can get the sanitized version. So anywhere that we're using the attributes to send to SQL, we'll want to use the new version. So that's going to be sanitized attributes. And down here in update, same thing. We'll be wanting to pull in the sanitized attributes. Up here, has attribute, we can still just use attributes. We're not even actually looking at the values in this case. So we don't need to worry about being sanitized. It's not SQL related. But for anywhere where we're going to be submitting values to SQL, we now have the ability to have attributes that are pre-sanitized for us. Now there's one more thing. Here inside attribute, getObjectVars is not the best way to get the list of attributes. In the next movie, we'll examine the problems with getObjectVars, and we'll talk about a better approach.